Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Growth Show. I have Tom Pickering and David Berkeley with me today. We are going to be discussing how leaders are complicit in halting change. There is so much change going on in the world at the moment. A key time for leaders to be stepping up and enabling change. But let's try and figure out a few of the obstacles that we as leaders put in our ways to stop change happening. So David, how do you think leaders stop change happening in their business?
I'm going to steal probably something that Tom will say, which is blind spots. Most of the time, most leaders think they're really good at change because they spend most of their time uncomfortable, because running a business is inherently uncomfortable. And so a lot of the time, I think leaders, feel that they're the ones driving change, feel that they're the ones in the driving seat. And so when they say, how do you create, change across your organization, or how do you engage people in more change? It's great. Well, that means that everyone else needs to do all the work. So the blind spots here that I see on a weekly basis with potential clients, and they usually don't become clients because of some of these reasons, is that number one, people go, well, the problem's with them. So fix them, like the team, get them more empowered, and that'll fix the problem. So you haven't had any role in them not being more empowered, is usually the subtext to that. So often, they've created, which the second point is, they've created a dependency culture on them that they then don't see as the problem. So even in a change situation, if people are coming back to them going, yeah, this is the thing that I want to do, is that okay? Yeah, sounds great, go and do it. It's feeding that cycle that they then become the blocker. And also then that people want their validation from them to make change. So that's usually the problem. The leaders often see the change that's required is external to themselves. They need to be the first one through the wall or over the wall, however you want to look at it. They need to be driving that change. And secondly, it's even if they have or they think they are, there can be sort of undercurrents of scarring of that, where they create a sort of sub-dependency culture by people keep coming back to them to check that the change they're doing is actually the right change.
Perfect. And Tom, what have you seen in this space?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is building on what David said. I think he's just pinched on my thunder, which is great. But is actually, if you look at the challenge that's actually taking place in the UK in October, it's extraordinary, and yet people aren't even talking about it, let alone talking about the actions they're taking. That's the first thing I'd say. I think the second thing, building on what David just said, is that it's very unlikely that our success is going to exceed our personal development level, and so I think there's a challenge with that. And I think, what is that challenge? I think it is actually around not seeing the issue. So David used the technical word blind spot. What does that mean? I think when things are difficult, we find ways to normalize things. So we might say that this is a crisis like every other crisis, and my leadership skills are okay, which is certainly a discussion I've had earlier on today with a very, very successful leader. And so there's this denial of actually, faced with a different situation, how are we going to change our actions? I think why is that? I think it's got a lot to do with pride. So I think when things get tough, our pride gets affected, and when things get uncertain, it just prevents us from accepting our own responsibility. But that's notwithstanding the real issue that we all, and I include me in this as well, have sat benignly around, which has led to unbelievable issues with sustainability and issues in the economy. Even at its simplest level, I remember when I was 17, I just couldn't understand how the UK economy worked with so little manufacturing. I just thought, hold on a minute, if you're not making things and selling things, how does that work? And it's taken a long time for that to actually sort of materialize. So I think there's some tough questions, and I think it really does require a new level of courage and a new level of understanding of what's driving us, and a new level of self-awareness to address some of this stuff.
Okay, that's good. David, Tom mentioned pride there. Where do you start breaking down someone's pride and ego on this? Is this a sort of a hammer and nail approach, or is it a more subtle process?
It's a really good question. There's a sort of work on point for people and this is something you can think about in your own leadership style for anyone who's listening. There's 3 states that people are in when it comes to change and development, I find, which is open, closed, and stuck. So someone who's closed is probably already switched this video off because they've gone, well, there's nothing new for me to learn here because I already know it and I'm already doing everything. So let's assume that we're talking to people who, if you've got this far in the video, you're listening because you're either open to change or you're stuck. So stuck means that you've kind of hit that glass ceiling. You've realized you've hit a capacity or a capability point, and what you're doing isn't quite working anymore, but you don't know how to change it, and you're kind of still working that out. Open is, guys, I don't know what, I've got to this point, help me. Help, how do we get past this? So any leader who is pride is sticking and they're in a closed state, and they're not looking for help, and they're not in that point, there's actually not really any point trying to help them at that stage because they're not going to do anything. Someone who's stuck, who realizes there's a problem but doesn't necessarily know how to get out of it, is you want to move them to that open stage. And that's just about how I do it, would be asking lots of questions around it and looking at kind of talking through where their thinking is going to take them to hopefully lead them then to looking outside of their own thinking to some of those answers. And if you do that, they're far more open to then taking on external ideas, which is the problem with closed people. So if you could tell someone who's closed the exact answer they want or the exact answer they need in that moment, and because they're close to it, they're never going to listen to you, and they'll actually resent you for it ultimately. But they've, as I said, they've probably already switched off from this video, so we don't need to worry about offending them. So that's the sort of thing, is realizing where you're at in that, and then where are you looking to get that. And for a lot of the time, leaders that I work with, when they get to that point of where pride has taken a bit of a bash or is about to take a big bash, it's as much about building them back up as a leader as it is helping them execute things. Because usually when you got to that point, there's a lot of collateral damage that's led to that, and often relational damage with people in the organization or around your company and those kind of things. So it can be really, really tough, which is why it's so important to have really good people around you as a leader to make sure that you continue to know what's north and south and, east and west, and, you're really staying on track. And people are telling you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear.
I mean, they're incredibly valid points. Quite a dangerous scenario to be that closed off, because the only time you're going to realize any change in your life is at those catastrophic moments, which could have been avoided. If you're just building up and ignoring it, it's very worrying.
Well, I mean, I can give you do a no names example. There's something that it's not a client, it's nothing I'm around, but the leader over the last 6 months has been his leadership style has become absent. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to be involved. You just do whatever you want to do. And he's mistaken that for delegation and empowering. It's not empowering at all if you haven't actually put the right structures in place to allow somebody to thrive. What you create is what happened when Alexander the Great died. You create all the generals then start fighting each other because you haven't built the right culture for people to, using Tom's analogy of the jazz band, you've got someone there on their DJ decks, another person's brought a clarinet, and it's an absolute, it's a dogfight. And that's what's being created, and this is going to cost the organisation hundreds of thousands of pounds in the short term. I mean, it's going to become a big problem. And he's completely blind to it. And I could go into his office right now today and tell him that. And he'll just go, oh, well, great. And he's not going to listen until things start hitting fans. And then he might be open to change. But that's going to be incredibly painful.
Yeah, that is really scary. And Tom, what would you add to that? I'm sure you've seen numerous scenarios like that.
Yeah, just over the last few days, I'll just give you... I've been working with 2 very, very experienced chief executives, and these are FTSE level chief executives, done turnarounds in very large car manufacturers and substantial organisations. And it was really interesting that one had been winning thinking trained and the other one hadn't. And actually there was a very distinct difference, because one was aware of the language and the other one was intellectualising, Nick. So pride, what does pride look like? It's this endless, I'm right and you're wrong, intellectualizing, and that unfortunately goes nowhere. And it tends to be the way a lot of good leaders and successful leaders operate. But actually, what was interesting, when you look at the difference in style, one, actually, when you begin to fix the right problem, it gives you much more empathy for the other person as well. So it actually means that it's not about Nick's right and Nick's wrong. It's just about understanding differences and also holding each other to account and making people aware of their language and actually why do certain phrases create stasis. So one phrase that was mentioned in this discussion was, this is a crisis like other crises, right? As if it was just the same as everything else, and it simply isn't. But that creates stasis, normalizes things, which justifies the status quo, and then you can of course justify everything else, and which is all intellectualized. Whereas what the other chap was talking about was actually the language that was used and how that creates stasis. So that's actually I don't think it's that difficult, because the guy who I've trained actually has only been on the program for a week or 2 weeks. And I'm so delighted. It's such a privilege to show somebody something that they weren't aware of. But when you become aware of this, actually it's then up to you to fix it and address it. But I think that's one of the most awful blind spots where a lot of leaders get involved. And if you just listen to the conversation, Nick, listen to the way you engage with your peers, this intellectualizing and really not getting under the skin and understanding where people are coming from, I think that's difficult. And I think the other thing I've noticed as well is that people realise that we think we know things that we don't know, because we assume that we know things that we don't know. And by the same token, we don't realise the things that we do know or other people might know in the team. So there's this dynamic of, accountability, not just to ourselves, but actually it's important to have a buddy. So, David or you, Nick, picking me up on my language and vice versa, because we're with the right heart, to look out for us, to make sure we're all staying on track. And that's the essence of the jazz band, or one of the elements of the jazz band, which enables you to play a tune without the music, without having a fixed script, because most businesses are about sticking to a fixed script. And no one wants to stick to a fixed script, and no one wants to listen to it. So I think that's how I just describe some of the answer to pride.
I think it's good. I do think it's quite a lot of work around this. I'm just trying to imagine scenarios of getting through to people. Like it sadly does need either huge carrot or stick moments in people's lives to get there. David, how do you advise people to the things to look out for when they might be stopping change happening in a business? So things they should be like watching out for in their mannerisms or day-to-day work.
Probably their diary. How full is their diary? How many meetings are they in that, if truth be told, they just don't need to be in them? So often if you sit down with someone and look at their diary, often they're involved in decisions in business that you go, could someone else not make this decision without you being there? Greatest respect, it's your business, you can do whatever you want. I mean, who am I? But so often people are just sort of fill their time, and no matter what anybody says to people in the company, talk to me however you want to talk to me. I'm a CEO, but I'm also your friend. I'm this. People are going to listen. They're going to see CEO, they're going to see founder, and they're not going to treat you. They're not going to talk to you like your friend or someone who isn't an employee whose rent is dependent upon you paying it. And I think so. The first place I look with people is the diary. Are you actually, even if you're in a room, it's going to affect the discussion, or it could affect this discussion. Let's move it from a less generalized term. It could impact things like that, and so making sure that people are spending their time on the right things, and when they're engaging with staff, which you really want them to be, are they empowering or are they creating a crutch? Or ultimately, are they creating a position where I often think that most people should be thinking about an exit from their business, where there's someone else that could take it on to a certain level, or they've hit a ceiling or whatever. Are they preparing people to be there if they're not in the room, or if they're not there at that moment? And often that's done through the diary.
Right. No, diary. I think that's brilliant. I think that's something most leaders you go into, and it's hard to find like a 5-minute window in their diary, and there's got to be some fat in that, some substantial fat.
Oh, 100%. 80-20 rule. I would say that 4 out of 5 days of your week are probably wasted time. So let's look at where you're wasting the time.
Yeah, and I think communication with your team around a sort of standard of I said to my guys that I will help them with 20% of their day-to-day work, and I'll tell them if that inches over that, right? And so they can be sort of aware of that dynamic, and it helps people sort of know where they stand with that and what they bring me into and what they don't, which sort of does free me up time to focus on other projects, which is good. John, what would you add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of final thoughts. I think what David just described creates dependence as well, which is very dangerous. So I think it's very important that people feel independent. I think the other big question is, if a leader's diary is full, what use are they to he or she to anybody? So if they're not available, actually, they're not accessible. So not only are they creating dependence, but they're not available either. And I think a lot of this actually is around the ego or pride. So it's around things like, you think you know better, right? And I certainly spent most of my career thinking I knew better, or feeling that as though I ought to know better, when in fact, actually, what matters, I think, a lot more is the interactions we have with other people and teams, just to keep us on track and to maintain our well-being, because we're extraordinarily social beings. This perspective of expecting to know better, I think, is just taking us, and that's a perspective which I think I personally challenged by just firing back to the respective leaders. Say, actually, what does that feel like if I'm right and you're wrong? And actually, what would happen if I put you first rather than trying to have this intellectualized discussion, which is very common in terms of the dialogue that takes place in businesses. So I think those are the things which create stasis, Nick, or prevent change takes place. The good news, I think, is once you're aware of them, then you can almost, it's a bit like David just then, he picked out the generalization. He actually corrected himself. So that's what good looks like in a very imperfect sort of way. And it's about us holding each other to account on those things.
Definitely. And I think with this work from home culture that's sort of sweeping in, the ability to become more transactional as a leader, and you become less available. I mean, someone should pick up the phone to you, but if any leader thinks at the moment someone would walk in their office, ask them questions for help, and how many calls during the day do they get that replace that, I bet that is far less, right? So I think right now, leaders, especially if you're going to embrace this work from home culture, and here in the city, we've got clients not coming back till January, right? And that's fine, and it makes sense. But there is definitely elements being missed by management in that time. And I think having a game plan how to work harder to stay connected and have the energy to do it. Also knowing we've now had 6 months of this habit of working from home. If you've got, David was referring to this person who's maybe sounds a bit sort of head in the sand in their approach to actually going through change, you're going to lose your energy and passion around this. And I think what would be a very interesting topic is, how do people get invigorated again? This is the first week we're seeing people really returning to the office, and it's very exciting, and it's for some it's going to be a real uphill battle of getting back into that process, really fighting it. And I think energy, passion, vision would be a great conversation for us to explore as well, for like how you can get revitalized again to go, because I think without that energy and passion, change is impossible, right? Because the energy and passion can help you get over the fear of what the change might bring, or the realization of who you become. So if you're up for that, I'd love to sort of delve into that and see where that goes. So it's I'll probably regret saying that. It's probably an incredibly hard topic. And we'll have nothing to say, but let's give it a go. But as always, Tom and David, such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you again to everyone. We're over 2,000 subscribers. We're just loving the comments and feedback from you guys. It's really good. Slowly creeping into back into offices and buying new kit and clearer pictures and better Wi-Fi and all the stuff that we need to professionalize this. But thank you for your loyalty and time during the lockdown period. We look forward to doing another one of these very soon. But until then, all the best. Bye-bye.